Hey everyone, welcome back to Today Assets Report, the channel where we break down the biggest moves in crypto before the rest of the world catches up. If you've been watching XRP lately, you already know something feels different. The energy is shifting, the numbers are moving, and today we've got some absolute bombshells to unpack. We're talking about a jaw-dropping XRP price glitch that showed up at $2,140.26, a major development out of the White House involving President Trump and crypto taxes, and the real reason why SWIFT, yes, the global banking giant, cannot afford to ignore Ripple and XRP anymore. So if you're not strapped in yet, now is the time, because this segment is going to be one for the books. LES kicked things off with that XRP glitch, because if you saw it and thought your eyes were playing tricks on you, they weren't. A verified price display recently showed XRP trading at $2,140.26. Now, before anyone starts celebrating and booking flights to the Maldives, let's be crystal clear. This was a data error, a glitch in the system. It was not a real market price. But here's what makes this story so much more interesting than just a tech hiccup. Glitches like this don't randomly happen to assets that nobody cares about. They happen to assets that are being actively queried, actively tracked, and actively integrated into serious financial infrastructure. The very fact that XRP's data feeds are being pushed and tested at this level tells you something important about where this coin sits in the financial world right now. What's even more fascinating about this glitch is what it reveals about the psychology of the XRP community and the broader crypto market. When that number flashed on screens, the internet absolutely lost its mind. Social media exploded. People were screenshotting it, sharing it, debating it. And while, yes, everyone rational knew it was a glitch, there was something deeper happening in that moment. People weren't just laughing at a data error. They were asking themselves, could XRP actually reach that level someday? And that question alone is worth sitting with, because when you look at the fundamentals, when you look at the legal clarity Ripple has been fighting to establish, when you look at the institutional partnerships quietly building in the background, a 4-digit XRP price is no longer just a fantasy for the most optimistic holders. It's a conversation that serious analysts are beginning to have openly. Now let's pivot to the White House, because what's happening there right now could reshape the entire crypto landscape in America and, honestly, the world. Reports are circulating and gaining serious traction that President Trump is preparing to push forward a plan to eliminate taxes on cryptocurrency transactions. That sink in for a moment. If crypto transactions became tax-free in the United States, the floodgates would open in a way we have never seen before. Right now, one of the biggest barriers to everyday Americans using crypto as actual currency, not just a speculative investment, is the tax burden that comes with every single transaction. You buy a coffee with Bitcoin, you owe the IRS a capital gains calculation. It's absurd, and it has been holding mass adoption back for years. Think about what a tax-free crypto environment would actually look like in practice. Businesses would have a real incentive to accept digital assets as payment. Consumers would feel comfortable spending their crypto rather than hoarding it out of fear of triggering a taxable event. Developers would build payment systems and applications around crypto with confidence. And XRP, which was literally designed to be a fast, low-cost transaction currency for cross-border payments, would be in an absolutely prime position to benefit from this kind of policy shift. Ripple has spent years building the infrastructure, cultivating the partnerships, and fighting the legal battles. If the tax environment in America suddenly becomes crypto-friendly, all of that groundwork starts paying off in a very real and very accelerated way. And speaking of Ripple's legal battles, let's not gloss over how important the resolution of the SEC case has been for XRP's credibility on the world stage. For years, that lawsuit cast a shadow over XRP and made institutions hesitant to touch it. Banks, payment processors, and fintech companies were watching carefully, waiting to see how the American legal system would treat this asset. Now that the dust is settling and XRP has been defended successfully in key rulings, the picture looks dramatically different. Institutional players who were sitting on the sidelines are now looking at XRP with fresh eyes. And when you combine legal clarity with a potentially tax-friendly White House, you have a combination that could trigger a wave of institutional adoption unlike anything XRP has seen before. Now let's get into the SWIFT conversation because this is where things get really deep and really important. SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, has been the backbone of international banking for over 5 decades. When your money moves from a bank in New York to a bank in Tokyo, odds are SWIFT is involved somewhere in that process. It's a system trusted by over 11,000 financial institutions across more than 200 countries. But here's the dirty secret about SWIFT that the banking world doesn't love to advertise. The system is slow, it's expensive, it's opaque, and it was built for a world that no longer exists. Cross-border payments on SWIFT can take anywhere from 1 to 5 business days. Fees are significant, and the level of transparency for the sender and receiver is minimal at best. Ripple's technology solves every single one of those problems in one elegant package. RippleNet enables transactions that settle in 3 to 5 seconds. The fees are fractions of a cent. The transparency is built into the protocol. And XRP serves as a bridge currency that eliminates the need for pre-funded nostro accounts. Those are the accounts that banks are currently required to hold in foreign currencies around the world just to facilitate international payments. By some estimates, nostro accounts collectively hold over $10 trillion in trapped liquidity globally. That is money that is sitting idle, doing nothing, just waiting to be used as a buffer for slow transactions. Ripple and XRP eliminate that inefficiency almost entirely. For banks, that's not just a convenience, that's a massive financial liberation. So why does SWIFT need Ripple and XRP? Because SWIFT is feeling the heat. The global payment space is evolving rapidly, and SWIFT knows that if it doesn't modernize, it risks becoming irrelevant. Younger fintech companies are already eating into its market share. Central banks are exploring digital currencies, and Ripple is signing partnerships with major financial institutions around the world at a pace that is impossible to ignore. SWIFT has actually been working on its own upgrades. Its ISO 2022 messaging standard and its new payment pre-validation systems are real attempts to modernize. But the honest assessment from many industry insiders is that these upgrades are incremental improvements on an old foundation. Ripple, on the other hand, is a new foundation entirely, and that difference matters enormously when you're talking about the future of global finance. Here's the geopolitical layer to this conversation that most people aren't talking about. The United States dollar has long been the world's reserve currency, and SWIFT has historically been one of the mechanisms through which American financial dominance is enforced globally. When the U.S. government sanctions a country, SWIFT is often the tool that cuts them off from the global financial system. That's powerful, but it's also creating a backlash. Countries around the world are actively seeking alternatives to dollar-dominated, SWIFT-dependent financial infrastructure. Russia, China, and others have been building parallel systems for years. And here's where it gets interesting. Ripple's technology is neutral. It works for any currency, any country, any institution. It's not owned by Washington. It doesn't serve one nation's geopolitical interests. That neutrality could make RippleNet and XRP the foundation for a genuinely global borderless payment infrastructure. And President Trump's crypto-friendly posture plays into this in a fascinating way. If the United States leans into crypto, if it embraces XRP as part of its financial future rather than fighting it, America could actually position itself at the center of this new global financial infrastructure rather than being left behind by it. Ripple is an American company. XRP was developed on American soil. For the U.S. to push Ripple out through regulatory hostility while the rest of the world adopts its technology would be one of the great own goals in financial history. A tax-free crypto policy would signal clearly that America is choosing to lead this revolution rather than resist it. Let's zoom back in on XRP's price trajectory for a moment because the broader market environment is setting up in some very interesting ways. Bitcoin has been making significant moves, and historically, when Bitcoin leads a rally, altcoins follow, and XRP has repeatedly shown that it can dramatically outperform when conditions align. The legal clarity is there. The institutional interest is growing. The regulatory environment under this administration looks more favorable than it has in years, and the fundamental use case for XRP, fast, cheap, cross-border transactions, is arguably stronger today than it was when XRP first launched. When all of these factors converge at the same time, the kind of price movement that makes people's jaws drop tends to follow. What's also worth noting is the pattern of behavior from large XRP holders, the so-called whales, in recent months. On-chain data has shown accumulation patterns that suggest smart money is quietly building positions. These are not the retail investors who panic sell at every dip. These are entities that do deep research, that understand the long-term thesis, and that are positioning themselves ahead of what they believe will be a major repricing event. When whales accumulate quietly while retail attention is elsewhere, it's typically one of the most reliable signals in crypto. And right now, multiple on-chain analysts are pointing to exactly this kind of accumulation behavior in XRP wallets. Let's bring it all together because individually, each of these stories, the glitch, the Trump tax policy, the Swift conversation, is interesting. But together, they tell a coherent and compelling story about where XRP is headed. The glitch captured the world's attention and sparked a real conversation about XRP's price potential. The Trump administration's crypto-friendly signals are removing the regulatory fog that has kept institutional money on the sidelines. And the Swift dynamic is making crystal clear that the global banking system needs exactly what Ripple has already built. You don't need to be a die-hard XRP maximalist to look at these three data points together and conclude that something significant is building. The pieces are aligning, and the window to pay attention and potentially act may be shorter than most people realize. Before we wrap up today, a quick word to everyone who's been holding XRP through the rough patches, through the SEC lawsuit, through the bear markets, through the years of waiting. You understood something early that the mainstream is just beginning to see. The technology was always real. The use case was always legitimate. The partnerships were always meaningful. What was missing was the regulatory clarity and the political will to let this asset operate freely in the world's largest economy. That clarity is arriving. That political will appears to be shifting. And if the environment that's being constructed right now comes to full fruition, the XRP story is nowhere near over. It may just be reaching the chapter that longtime believers have always known was coming. Stay tuned to Today Assets Report, keep doing your research, and we'll see you in the next one.